Hi. So we are on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and people generally have a bunch of feelings about seeing their family. What is the dinner table going to look like? We are still in the middle of COVID, so I know that a bunch of folks are either going to be staying home, or it's going to be really small, or some people are still gathering like nothing's happening, to be real.
And creating mini Super Bowl of super spreaders.
Um, so that is happening. And today's topic is focused on, so I like to say, I'm not trying to heal with white supremacists. And I feel like this has been a refrain that I've said for the past 3 weeks, to remind y'all that just because this election is over doesn't mean that the damage that has been done by the white supremacists in chief and other folks that have taken advantage over the past 4 years, but really the length of my lifetime, is easily forgiven, or that it should be, right? And so, again, being rooted in us wanting to build an anti-racist, anti-fascist coalition, what does that actually mean? What does unity look like? What does this post-Trumpian world look like? And so, Lucy, what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, my initial thoughts is that there is no post-Trumpian world. Trumpism is here to stay, and we all have to ask ourselves, what does it mean to move forward in a good way, in an ethical way? Because that 71 million people, those are our fellow colleagues, our pediatrician, our children's and nieces and nephews, teachers, social workers, you name it. And so we now have to think about those of us who are serious about building an anti-racist, anti-fascist coalition. We need to start thinking about, what does it mean for us to be in intimate relationships with these people, whether it be from family, work, and all those kinds of things. And what does it mean for us to build a coalition, a formidable coalition? Because that formidable Trumpian coalition has not come asunder because their leader is no longer the president. On the contrary.
Yeah. And so I think that we have, 2020 has been a year where folks are really coming to grips with the fact that that there was even a need for racial reckoning. Like, if this was 2016 or 2012, we were in a post-racial society, and so it is really hard to separate the presidential election from societal views, because we have this weird belief, which I want to disabuse of all of, is that political leaders are our leaders. They shouldn't be, for a bunch of reasons, but because in America, in the United States, folks really have this deference and this like belief, and provide this platform to political leaders as moral compasses, as examples of how we should focus in society, as aspirational hashtag goals. We give folks this influence over society, so that leaves us prey to having the person with the highest office in the land, the president, if they want to signal things both positively or negatively, it trickles down to the rest of society. And so, kind of like you were saying, Lucy, white supremacy did not begin and end with Trump. It did not begin with and will not end with Trump. However, the past 4 years have been really difficult to, it's going to be really difficult to move past. If you have been a victim of the vitriol, the hatred, the xenophobia, the homophobia, the transphobia, the literal violence of that has been abound in these past 4 years, and on display, and actually supported and uplifted. So when we're in a place where Lucy was sharing with me before we got on, that like Kyle Rittenhouse, the dude who murdered 2 people in I'm not gonna mess up the Midwestern place, but during the uprisings this summer, posting $2 million bond, I have to ask who, like, that was crowdfunded bond, bail money. So like there were people in the United States in the middle of a pandemic who are willing to give up their coins to free a murderer. How do you heal with those people? How do you sit next to that person and act like everything is cool? How do you feel safe with people? And I think there is this notion that you can like set aside your political beliefs and still deal with people's humanity. But when your political beliefs are rooted in dehumanizing me or other people, if you are willing to sacrifice as many white people as possible to uphold white supremacy, as we saw in Charlottesville, as we saw with Kyle Rittenhouse, like white supremacy is actually killing white people as well. And so it's not to say that if you are not a Black or Indigenous person or a non-WASP in America, that you shouldn't, that, you know, it doesn't really affect you, or you shouldn't be having these conversations, or this space isn't for you. I challenge you to think differently, because actually you are steeped in the trauma of white supremacy as well.
Yeah, and so what people need to understand is that white supremacy, it asks, like, if white supremacists have their way and they were to create an ethno state, that's gonna be a huge problem for white queer people, a huge problem for white trans people, a huge problem for white women and femmes, because like white supremacy is also rooted in patriarchy, and like The Handmaid's Tale is not it's a scary show, because those are the plans of people. And so just because we're talking about my subjugation, your subjugation, the subjugation of certain folks, that does not mean that white people who do not check certain boxes that white supremacy is looking for, that does not mean you yourself could not be subjugated. And so I just think that anti-racist whites need to really think critically about, like, if white supremacists get in power, what does that mean for you and your body and your understanding of the self?
And so we are now tasked to reconcile, and so I don't even want to say like reconcile. Okay, so there are 71 million people who voted for Donald Trump, having lived this past 4 years along with you and I. Everybody has been in the same reality, knowing full well what has happened over the course of these last 4 years.
Allegedly the same reality. Allegedly.
No, I think it's the same reality. Folks just don't care. We are not impacted by the same reality. We are not all playing the same role in the same reality, but we are in this physical space and time at the same time. And I want to actually put the onus on folks to take responsibility for that. It's not something that's happening out here and this other thing and y'all don't know. Like that, like for me, ignorance is not a pass. I don't
think they're ignorant. I actually really do. I don't know. I think some people are in their own reality.
I mean,
these are the same people who really believe that the Mexicans, the Blacks, the queers, the trans people are coming for their stuff. They actually somatically in their body feel that. They actually feel as if white people are being oppressed and subjugated.
But we're occupying space with those same people. Like, we in the same room. Like it doesn't matter what internal narrative that you are. Everybody is the director of the movie of their lives, right? Like whatever internal dialogue that you have going on, that's on you. Like I can't control that. But in reality, like if I were to say we're on a Wednesday, I just came back from Trader Joe's. There were 200 people inside the Trader Joe's. I'm not 200 people because actually they're metering and all the things. There are like 50 people inside the Trader Joe's, and we are all experiencing the same time and place differently because of the internal narratives that we play, right? But ultimately we were all still like run the tape back. Like we were all in that same store for that same 45 minutes. And so I think I apply that to everybody who has physically been in the United States since November 2016. And whether or not you spin a narrative to explain or contextualize the events of the past 4 years, that's on you. Like we all do that. Like that's it is what it is. But like this reality has happened. Like there are facts. There like there are no the history book is going to be like boom, 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 boom. Like this happened on the 3rd. This happened on the 2nd. This happened. Okay, well, what you get my point.
I get your point. However, how do you heal? How do you have a not even heal? How do you have a regular conversation when the facts are so up for debate for the other party?
Well, the thing is that like, I mean, okay, so I'm gonna speak for myself. I don't debate facts. Like facts are facts. You could agree or you could not agree. I am not wasting my mental energy, space, or time like trying to convince you of another reality that you reject, right? I will say that is one of the barriers of how do you heal with the 71 million, right? This is why I fundamentally believe it is impossible to heal with the 71 million. And we'll get into what is actually possible. But I really want to harp on this fact that like healing requires, like, I don't know if anybody has been a part of a restorative justice circle. Like you need to have community agreements. You need to have like basically terms and conditions for you to set the space for you to even have the conversation for folks to be able to get what they need and be open to accountability and justice. And we cannot have that. Like I fundamentally, what ground rules am I going to have with the white supremacist who believes that I shouldn't exist?
And you know what's a beautiful thing in you bringing up RJ and RJ process. An RJ process is not in and of itself, it's not healing. It can put you on the path towards your healing, but literally all it does is create the conditions for us to get clear on what happened, who was impacted, what do you need if you are the victim, and how were you impacted? The person who caused the harm, what do they need in order to take accountability and take responsibility and to atone? Fam, the amount of intention and amount of work that is needed to even create that kind of space that puts those two people or one of those people on the road to their healing, what does that look like for our nation state currently when 71 million people still believe that their guy was robbed?
That is the other part, is that it's not to say that okay, we had an election and the next day people were in their feelings, they're disappointed, they're frustrated, and like whatever, like any other normal reaction, versus the denialism and the conspiracy theory and the machinations and the intentional voter suppression, the laser focused intentional attempt to disenfranchise millions of Black voters specifically, right? To mess with the margins, to think that you can eke out a win like that when you are losing by 7 million. There's 7 more million people voted for Joe Biden. I don't care about a 20,000 person margin in a state that, like, I mean, I have feelings about the Electoral College, but whatever. Like, ultimately, 7 more million people. Why do we have to spin this whole narrative around the 71 million people who voted for the other person? And the reason why, right? Because there are folks that are like, I don't care, Biden won, it's over, that's not my problem, get over it. We won by 7 million votes, whatever. Again, the reason why we cannot just discount that is because these are folks that are your neighbor, that could be your babysitter watching your kid, that could be your aunt, that could be, the person, your boss, that could be the person who's in charge of your local, your local beat cop. Like they're literally, it could be
your doctor who's getting ready to deliver your baby.
Right.
These are the ways in which people get caught up, people die, because what happens when, again, racism, xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia is a key feature of Trumpism. It is not a defect. It's not a bug. It's not a mistake. That is actually, it's central, which is why different people of different races and ethnicities can come together and all. Yeah, this is how an African American Black man, an East Asian, you name it, all meet up at their voting poll, and they're all voted for Trump.
Yeah, because there's something in it, for everybody. And I think that just as I framed that, like, white supremacy negatively impacts and kills white people, folks that are not white, and we've said this over and over again, actively uphold white supremacy. And so when we're talking about the 71 million, we're also talking about the Black folks, the Latinx folks, the Indigenous folks, the trans folks, the LGBT, the LGBTQ folks that voted for Trump, right? Like, they are in that calculus of the 71 million. And so this conversation is not geared towards a particular audience, because, like, everybody has a role to play, has something at stake, and has been impacted. And so when I think of healing with white supremacy, specifically because there are calls from every community leader, every politician, Joe Biden, the politicos, the commentators, the newspaper art, like everywhere is now about, like, now we need to heal and unify. And my hot take is that we have spent the past 400 years trying to heal with white supremacy, and here we are still. Again, where there are no conditions set for us to be able to heal unless you divest from white supremacy, unless you reject white supremacy, unless you are anti-racist. And that is a process that a bunch of folks are not willing to start or to even interrogate.
Yeah, and what I think we need, for those of us, I'm assuming people who are watching this are people, these are our people, right? These are our people who are like, yes to anti-racism, yes to anti-fascism, yes to gender justice, yes to all the things. And we have to think about, we have two things coming up: 2022 midterm elections and 2024, like, general elections. We need to strengthen our anti-racist, anti-fascist coalition, like, get clearer, get crisper, and we need to broaden. Because if we do not, like, Trump almost got a second term. So what does that look like for us? And again, and I'm assuming people who are watching this are people who are interested in engaging in election politics, who are interested in getting those kinds of wins. So we have to be thinking strategically, good people. We have to be thinking like organizers. If you're not an organizer, you need to be thinking about what kind of organizing groups can you become a part of, that you can learn from, you can be trained. Because I think I don't know if we can, actually don't believe truly we can push a Kamala and a Joe to be left. However, the people you see almost every day, the people who you sit at the dinner table with, and your family members, this, that, and a third, I think there is more space to bring those people in, to get them to deepen and enhance their politics, and that there are some people that can be converted. We're not going to convert 50 million. We ain't going to convert probably 10 million. But we have got to really think about sheer numbers. We have got to expand our cafeteria table, and we need to have an honest conversation and put all the strategies on the table. What does expanding our cafeteria table look like? What does it look like to expand the tent of justice look like? Because next time it gets close, it might not be close, and it might not be in our favor.
Right. And I think that when so folks are, like I said, going to be with their families over the next few days with their friends, whether
Thoughts and prayers.
I was going to say whether virtually or in person. And one of the things is that you are going to encounter your Trump supporting family relative or your Trump supporting high school friend or whatever it may be that you link up with over the long weekend. And we need to think about how do we invite them to the cafeteria table. That does not, again, equate with this, with accepting the ideology that they believe in right now. And so I think the solution is not to heal with white supremacists, but how do we unify with white supremacists as like in a way that is strategic in building this anti-racist, anti-fascist coalition? Is that possible or not is the big existential question. But if we do a deeper dive, and you know, we like to disaggregate the data, we're going to disaggregate the Trump voters, because there are levels to this, right? So there are avid white supremacists. There are the casual white supremacists that really are against PC culture, right? And want to be able to say what they want when they want, you know, everybody be damned. There are the folks that are unbothered by white supremacists or white supremacy. So they're not particularly ascribed to the fact that other groups are inferior or need to be marginalized or whatever it may be. However, they're not bothered by it. Like, they're not turned off. They're still going to show up to the Trump rally and they're not turned off by, you know, somebody getting assaulted in the crowd, for example. And then there are the denialists. So they say, I am not a white supremacist. They are offended if they're all the white supremacists. I just support this person because I believe in XYZ. I believe in fiscal responsibility. I believe in family values. I believe in I'm a pro-life person. I am a Catholic. Like, whatever their XYZ may be, to rationalize, because they're in denial that they're actually actively invested in and upholding white supremacy. There's just this issue that the other guy doesn't have right, which is why I cast my ballot to be a part of that 71 million. And so can we actually reconcile with, be in relationship with, unify, add to the coalition, any of those folks?
Not, because even the word unity is just unity, and it's just like, it's making a lot of assumptions about how we're coming to the table and what we're gonna like negotiate or not negotiate. And this is where I just think we just have to, you know, the truth is in the mess, is I heard Shira Hassan say recently. I really appreciated that. And the mess is solidarity work. And I'm always going to go back to the awesome teachings of Fred Hampton, who was the chairman of the Black Panther Party. This was a person, this was an organizer who was a beautiful example of what it means when you do the political education and you raise people's consciousness. People will make the right political calculations. What do I mean by that? This was a Black man who was able to get indigenous folks, Puerto Ricans, rural white folks to really be like, yeah, I guess our enemies are the same and we should be in coalition with each other and we should throw down with each other. But that's messy, complicated, sticky work. And that means that person is probably going to use the N-word, or is going to say something that like that's going to trigger me. But then I have to be like, but dang, I really see there's an opening there. And then I have to make the political calculation. Am I going to stay engaged long enough to engage the opening? Now, I'm going to be really honest. We all got to get clear on what's our ministry. I don't think that's my ministry to talk to that kind of white person. That's not my ministry. But the white people who are watching this, the white people who say they are anti-racist, they have to do the political calculations of like, you are the kind of messenger that certain Trump voters, you're the only kind of messenger that they can listen to. And so I think the last 4 years, we had a lot of time being in our righteous indignation. And I guess I want to ask us, is that still a helpful strategy? If, again, I'm talking to the vote or die constituency, the people who really believe in voting. If you really believe in voting, then that means you have to expand this side of the room, this cafeteria table, like I call it. I don't know how you do that and stay in your righteous indignation, and how you do solidarity work. So I don't know if we need to unify, because consciousness needs to change. Consciousness needs to be transformed, and people need to be restored and recovered from their white supremacy. It reminds me of that old Spike Lee movie. I think it's The Drop Squad. I think it's Spike Lee, where they would like kidnap people and you just do this whole consciousness thing to get them radicalized in the right way, in the good way that they're supposed to. I think that's literally what we need. We need to have a drop squad. Like, who can be rescued and how?
And I think that you hit part of this. The reason why even unify is not sufficient is because unifying doesn't actually ask us to do the work, to actually heal. It doesn't ask us to interrogate anything. Unifying doesn't ask us to address any of our differences. It just asks us to stand together behind a particular thing that we can agree on. And it actually doesn't make space for the harm and the really detrimental things at play. And it's also not sustainable. So when we talk about, if you don't care about elections, and that's really not why, like, that's not the future that you're fighting for or thinking towards, but you want to be in a cohesive society, right, where we don't have a massive chasm between a large population of a large group of our population believing in one thing and a large part of our population living in a completely alternate reality, believing in a completely different thing. Let's say that this election was valid per se. Then you do still have to be able to do the solidarity work to be able to get folks on the same page, right? So it requires to be in relationship to be able to have a healing process, to be able to be in solidarity, and even in to be able to stand in unity or whatever that may be. And nobody is talking about the preconditions for having an actual relationship. And I think that's what it comes down to. What are the preconditions that are required for you to be in relationship with somebody who fundamentally believes in white supremacy?
Ooh, child, I get this question a lot from the people who come to my trainings and workshops and whatever. And I have to be careful how I say this. It's been a long, hard 4 years. A lot of people
that's right.
A lot of people have fallen out with a lot of people, and I think some falling out has been necessary. Some of it has been completely necessary, but now I'm just thinking about. I just think there is a elitism that those who call themselves progressive and leftist, who are white, who've transcended their rural roots, who've transcended their hillbilly kind of whatever. They got rid of their twang and now they're like sophisticated in a very specific way. I think those people have to think really critically about, what does it mean to go back for my people? But white people struggle to see other white people as their people. Now, as Black people, I don't know. Almost every Black person I know has a Trump voter family member.
Yes,
like that's regular, right?
Trump voter family members,
right? But the last 4 years, did you hear a lot about Black people and people of color who had Trump supporters?
Apparently.
But 71 million just tell us that this touched everyone, right? And so I guess I say all of this to say is, what are the conditions? The conditions are the same way we accuse that side of not seeing our humanity. Is that true for us too? Is there a way in which we believe if these people didn't go to certain schools, or they don't have degrees, period, or they live in a certain part of the United States, they eat certain kinds of food, they listen to certain kinds of music, does that disqualify them from them being sophisticated political beings? who can be restored, who can be redeemed, who can be organized. And I think a lot of people on the left who call themselves progressive, whatever you call yourself this week, have to do a lot of work around their classism. And because their classism is not going to allow them to do the fundamental messy work of solidarity, because everybody and their mama on this side think they better than everybody on that side. And I don't see, in the end, you know who's hurt by all this condescension? Black people, indigenous people, people at the border, them kids who they can't find, them 600 some odd kids who they can't find their mamas and their daddies. Those are the people who get hurt, because these two groups are locked into their ego. They're like two rams, right?
It's a lot of ego. I mean,
solidarity work is humbling work. Why? Because you got to take that ego and put it in your pocket, because you have to ask yourself now, Lucy on her own would never engage in a conversation with you. But Lucy, who was here trying to push forth an anti-racist agenda, I have to swallow and really dig deep and ask the ancestors to show me your humanity so I can have this conversation, so I can see if I could push you. But if you have not done your work, you don't know what your triggers are, and you don't know how to like be able to say, Lucy, we're going into ego, that's not what's needed in this situation. How we gonna build this anti-racist coalition? And y'all, I'm gonna sound like a broken record, because until I find evidence in a new pathway, this is it. AOC said something really, really prescient, and I hope it's not the nail in our own coffin. With the New York Times recently, y'all, like, we don't have enough on our side to continue to win elections on this small margin. If we do not build out our coalition, we are in trouble. We're in trouble.
And I think part of our detriment is us believing that a Trump supporter looks, or folks who perpetuate white supremacy look, sound, are from a particular region, do a certain type of job, have a certain type of socioeconomic status, because that's just not true. And I can say, as a person who is related to and knows Trump supporters, some of which are my Facebook friends, to say that actually there are plenty of intelligent, economically secure, well-traveled, internationalist Trump supporters. That it's not that they don't know better, right? And so there really is there's this like very much like a fine line in how to not fall into the trap of like being paternalistic, to assume, right? Like, people have to actually do the work. And I know they're like, we say do the work a lot, but like it actually takes thoughtful and intentional work to be able to build a coalition, to be able to be in right relationship with people, in order to have a society, to create a society where people are respected and valued, and safe. And ultimately, that's what I'm fighting for, right? The multiracial anti-fascist coalition, the purpose is so that we have a society where people are free from harm, are able to thrive, and to be able to fully express themselves and be whole humans. And so you can't dehumanize your enemy and then think that we're fighting for liberation.
Because why? Because Auntie Audrey already taught us that the master's tools would not dismantle the master's house. So you cannot engage in the cesspool of racist thinking. Racist thinking has already organized us to think that certain bodies are not worth it and should not be around. So if you have that kind of thinking about Trump supporters, that's not anti-racist thinking, and that does not put forth an anti-racist agenda. Like, you folks, being a bigot, engaging in these dehumanizing things might make you feel good, but it's empty calories, folks. It don't give it's not it's nutrient deficient. It's not gonna power you. And so what is the food that's gonna power us? Really looking at our opponents and really thinking about, like, where is the humanity? What, if anything, here can be saved or salvaged? And asking yourself real talk, am I the appropriate person to push this person? Or can I just plant some seeds? What do I need to do to build up enough resiliency that I keep this door cracked open enough, not so that you can be dehumanized, but so that you can engage and be in conversation and be in coalition with these people? Because we have to think critically here. Let's take the white Trump supporter. They're not listening to the Krystinas of the world. They're not listening to the Lucies of the world. We have to be honest. And if every white person on this side thinks, oh, I don't have time, I can't even. Well, who gonna do it? Rush Limbaugh got time.
Mm-hmm.
Sean Hannity got time. That fool with the bow tie, he got time.
Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, like all of them people got time. And so, y'all, if y'all are killing yourselves, risking creating super spreaders to be with your family,
make it be productive at least.
Oh, Jesus, make it make sense. Make it make sense. If you're gonna go, right? And at the same time, I will say this with a caveat: I actually don't believe in only swooping down once a year to browbeat a family member.
Correct.
I don't believe in that. And I think that's why a lot of y'all going home for the holidays is so stressful, because you go with all your hubris, you go with all your ego, and you go with all your whatever. If you don't care about your family member 11 months out the year, don't come with that bullshit at Hanukkah, at Christmas, at Rosh, you name it, you Seder, whatever y'all call the thing, whatever y'all do. Don't come with all that uppityness when you don't care about your family members 11 months out the year. Like, come on, y'all. Like, is the goal to be righteous, or is the goal to expand the coalition?
That part. Because being right does what for you? Again, if the pool is this small, it doesn't matter if y'all are all right. Like, it really does not serve us. And it does not serve you.
Oh, but you know what? Nuance. We're not good at nuance. Because I also want to affirm now, Chris, there's a lot of work to be done on our side. A lot. Within our own coalition, my God, we have so much work to do, and we still need to build the coalition. So as we're doing the internal fighting, which is crucial, which is necessary, because we do need to push this party left. No, bitch, we're not going to the center. We're pulling you to the left. So that needs to happen. And guess what? We still need to have these welcome orientations, because we need to be onboarding more and more people into the fold. So both of these are they're not at odds with each other.
And I think that this is, I mean, if you're tired by this conversation, it is also exhausting thinking about this. But here's the caution that I have. Just like I don't want you to go in there guns blazing, talk about pow pow. I'm gonna call in all my family members on Turkey Day. Just like I caution that we don't want to go to that extreme. I also want to caution the broader movement about, like, not the broader the movement. I actually don't really care about these people, but the larger narrative of folks who are trying to expand that lunch table. All of your energy cannot and should not be on converting Trump supporters.
Yeah.
I don't want a gajillion think pieces about them.
Nope.
I don't want any additional dollars being going to organizing them or educating. Like, it is.
Just say no to the Lincoln Project.
Please save your coins. Do not give the grifters more money. Anyway, so like, I think there's a fine line between, like, again, realizing that you need to be able to be in right relationship with the people in your life or not have them be in your life. That's the baseline premise of this conversation. The next thing is that we need to use our energy and political capital and social capital to be able to build up and build and support folks who are already doing the work. And that is not a Lincoln project.
You sure?
I'm 100% sure. Like, that is not, I had to, so I like don't really use Twitter, but 2020 has made me a Twitter user. Between COVID and this election cycle, and racial reckoning, I've been like, and now I'm on Twitter almost as much as I'm on IG. And y'all know, well, y'all may not know, but I'm like a very big IG user. And I had to, like, I've been avoiding the news for the past like 3 weeks. I just read the news, but I don't watch cable news. And as I was like queuing up my General Hospital, the like MSNBC was playing in the background because that was the last channel that was on. And on Hulu Live, you know, you would think they pay me for these things, but they don't. I like, what is that Tom Carville, whatever Carville, that like old dude from the Clinton administration that is from Louisiana and is basically a walking billboard for anti-PC culture, but is a Democrat. And, you know, apparently we need to be listening to him. So he was speaking, and dude was like livid, like visibly agitated, like talk about some, and this is why, we need to stop talking about this BS of the police and the border and focus on the real issues that impact real people as Democrats.
Real people, real issues. Come on, dog whistle.
So I said, oh no, for the first time in my life, I took myself to Twitter. I added him and I was like, it's insulting. First of all, it's insulting. Second of all, you like to think like, because, we need to go back to like the issues that won us in 2018. I said, policing and the border were on the ballot in 2018, and that's how your party won. And that's also how your party beat Trump. So thank God you're irrelevant. And like this is like, when we say there's so much house cleaning and cleaning to do, I don't want for us to, in November of 2024, be having this conversation of, oh wow, we really wasted our time trying to organize Trump supporters, and yet in Trump wins a second term, because he could do that, by the way. Like it's just, and we had part of this conversation last week around, like the progressivism versus centrism. But if you don't take care of your base, which is actually like the demographic future and your like hardcore constituency, you are going to be irrelevant. And I think that it is necessary from a sociological and like social scientist perspective, and just as humans functioning in this society in the United States, to understand why people voted for Trump. I think it is important. I think we do have intimate relationships with folks that voted for him, and we need to navigate that. But at its core, like, we are not going to win or achieve liberation or whatever it may be by focusing all of our time and resources into debunking a group of people that at the end of the day voted for white supremacy. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
And this is excellent, beautiful. And what about the people who are kind of already on our side, but they're disaffected and don't participate?
That could be a whole other conversation. But I think we were having a little bit of this conversation.
Yeah, we were having this conversation around material conditions, and I think it's important for you to bring what you said into this conversation.
So I think ultimately everything is for naught if like we can't, like, you can learn all of the things, have all the keywords, do all of the reading circles, have the actions, like have the mass demonstrations. If ultimately we cannot change the material conditions of the average person, if Joe Schmo does not see a difference in their day-to-day life 30 years from now, like, then yes, we have some societal change, but we don't actually, like, we're not winning. Like, things aren't changing for people. And ultimately, people are going to continue to be, because people forget 1/3 of the population, not even 1/3, I think it's like 3/5 of the population didn't even vote. Like, or maybe it's 1/3. It's somewhere in there. But a big chunk of people just didn't vote at all, even knowing that this felt like an existential election. And part of that is because I've been alive for 30 or 32 years. What has changed in the day-to-day life of most folks in the time that I've been alive?
If you're a millennial, like a millennial your age or an elder millennial, you've lived through 9/11, you've gone through a recession, you living through a pandemic, you about to be in another recession. You have seen your traditional paths to upward mobility be completely foreclosed. Yeah, your material conditions have not gotten better. If anything, you are grateful if you still have your parents or your caregivers who own homes, who have income, who have been able to rescue you more than you would have liked in your adult life.
Exactly. And so when we are envisioning futures, when we have these political discussions, when we're trying to build the tent and get people on board, how are we actually changing people's day-to-day, improving people's day-to-day lives?
Okay, so here,
instead, how are people physically safe, and how are people able to have upward mobility?
I feel like what happens is we get so in, which is why people are not, this is why 1/3 or 3/5 of people didn't vote. We don't talk about justice enough. We don't go for the justice wins. It's a lot of talks around rights. It's a lot of talks around inclusion. It's a lot of talks about representation. It's a lot of talks about being invited to disgusting, awful, racist, misogynist tables, but no push towards justice, right? Like, at this point, if you've watched enough of these things, you know I probably can't get an episode in without not referring to the Daily. So here come another Daily reference. Go ahead and have a sister on the show.
Seriously.
But this morning was an episode on food banks, and I was gutted by that episode. I live in a predominantly Black neighborhood. There is a church in my neighborhood, and yesterday when I took the dog for a walk, you know, they've been working on my street. I was like, why the traffic's so bad? Until I realized the lines of cars were people waiting to get groceries from that church. And Krystina, between that, seeing that yesterday and hearing what's happening to food banks across the United States of America, I'm weeping. I wept because, like, this past weekend, if we're friends on Facebook, you saw that I made a status about, like, oh, I went to Trader Joe's and I went to Whole Foods, aka Whole Paycheck, the entire weekend, which means, you know, and I went to Target. So you already know, like, thoughts and prayers to my bank account. But you know what? Real talk, I'm so grateful that I have the resources and I have the ability to feed myself, to feed my family, because the average United Statesian, if it was not for their local food bank, they would not know how they were going to feed themselves and their children. And here's the gag. The gag is, because we live in a nation state that makes it legal for rich, billionaire, multimillionaire people, it's legal for them not to pay their fair share of taxes, because they are a little bit scared about what's going to happen to their money. They're not giving to food banks. And so now, because these nonprofits can no longer count on the benevolence of people who are legally shirking their responsibility to pay their fair share of taxes, people are going to go hungry. This is the stuff around justice that just makes me so freaking mad. In a nation state like this, where we're so wasteful, people cannot eat. Wow. Like, that is the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night. How do you not know that? How do you know that and not be angry? Not be angry that we have a nation state that allows this kinds of tax holes and loopholes. I don't want to live in a world where I have to count on the benevolence of a rich person. No, charity is not justice. We need to work towards justice. What's the thing we need to do? And again, I'm talking to the vote or die crowd, the people who get on their pompous, righteous horses every midterm election, every general election to wag their finger like, oh, you need to vote. Your ancestors did this, your ancestors did that. Okay, but where's the justice though?
Right.
People are tired of voting for status quo. People are tired of voting for, do you want a blue master's house or do you want a red master's house? People want to vote for liberation. People want to, and you know what? That's even ridiculous because liberation ain't coming.
Liberation is not on the ballot.
Ain't coming.
If they're on the ballot, they're not about liberation.
Come on, fam. Like it should be just. We should all collectively be disgusted that during a global pandemic where most of us do not have health insurance, myself included, people gotta stand in line at a food bank. My ACA, finally, it's gonna start in January. It's gonna start in January, but with that $6,000 deductible, let me shut my mouth though. Foolishness. If I didn't have a pre-existing condition, baby, I would have told you wouldn't even insurance, kiss my butt, cause baby, this is a mess. But anyways, that made me mad. That should make us angry. And this is why a lot of people don't engage, because people want, again, they want their material conditions to be changed. They want justice. And right now, I hear a lot of talk about unification. I hear a lot of talk about healing. But baby, I see no justice items, no justice agenda item.
And I think that ultimately, how do I say this? And it goes back to the original Southern strategy. White supremacy thrives. Just, I mean, really, white supremacy, xenophobia, homophobia, like thrive in economic instability and thrive in social chaos. And so it's like this like self-perpetuating cycle of, again, like folks cannot be, if folks weren't feeling like they're in this existential threat, whether it's about power, privilege, or literally a job, right? Like jobs ends up being a resonating like theme for a reason and effective for a reason. Then we can't, like, people are going to fall. I mean, well, that's really how like fascism thrives. But anyway, that's really what that is. But and we can also go into a critique of capitalism. But anyway, I digress. I think that basically these conversations are intertwined. Again, we cannot talk about dismantling white supremacy, divesting from white supremacy, trying to understand and be in some type of reconciliation or healing process with folks who are invested in white supremacy if we do not understand that there's talking the talk, but there's also walking the walk. And how can we say that that all of us would benefit from the dismantling of white supremacy? How? I think that's also on us to articulate how
our lives
are better with, like, if we dismantled white supremacy.
Yes, because the average. Okay. So today I was listening to Code Switch and they replayed their episode that they aired 4 years ago when Trump first got elected. And there were quite a few people of color on that episode who were talking about their Trump voting folks.
They should have done a like go back to, because code switch does that. Like they'll go back to people.
Yeah, they didn't go back. But what you know what? I totally spaced out. The dog just made me space out. What was the last thing you just said?
That ultimately we need to show how people actually benefit from canceling white supremacy.
Yes. So in that episode, what I found interesting is that you had Kat Chow, who used to be on the show. Her dad voted for whatever. This is an immigrant. So you had the black man whose dad is from Compton, who voted for Donald Trump twice, right? And I guess what I'm thinking about, if we don't do the political education and we just assume that people's identities will make them vote, quote unquote, the right way, this is where we get messed up. Because we have got to be able to show people, or again, you're going to hear me use this phrase a lot, raise your people's consciousness. You have to be able to show the white rural worker, the xenophobic black person, the xenophobic immigrant person who quote unquote got here quote unquote the right way, who has been assimilated into a certain white supremacy, but let's say middle class status, right? Because people forget a lot of things once they become staunchly middle class.
I was supposed to say, there are plenty of immigrants that are not middle class.
Yeah. But let's be honest about who's most likely to watch this. Like, let's really be honest around like who's most likely to watch this, and that in these United States of America, this illustrious place everybody wants to be is middle class. And once you make it to middle class, the middle class never has a race, never has a gender, never has a faith. It's always the middle class. This is like, who are these amorphous people? And how is everybody and their mama middle class? But that's a conversation for another day. We have got to do the hard work at showing Black people, Indigenous people, immigrants, newly arrived, you name it, why white supremacy puts us in a very situation where all of our destinies are mutually tied, and why it's a good thing to undo white supremacy. We have to do that hard work, and we have to have white people are going to need a very different kind of talking point. The white people in Maine, the white people in rural, the white people on the West Coast, the white people who are evangelicals, the white people who are whatever. Each of those different white people is going to need different talking points. Immigrants gonna need their own talking points depending on what country they come from, because that socialism thing is going to be very serious. Black people, depending on, are they immigrants? Are they from the West Coast? Are they whatever? Boom, boom, boom. Different geographic, whatever. Moral of the story is we have got to have different strategies. We have got to be literally, y'all, PowerPoints, Venn diagrams, worksheets, you name it. We need to build all of the tools to show everyone, this is why you need to tell white supremacy no, and this is why you need to say yes to anti-racism. We have got to make it that plain, not in a way that disrespects people and makes them feel not smart, but we need to make our case plain and simple, because our opponent makes their case very plain and simple. We do not. Now, I think some of us are better at it than others, but by and large, this side is not good at democratizing, and actually, let me not say that, mainstream folks, because trans folks, Black feminist thinkers, cultural workers have been doing that hard work of democratizing, consciousness raising. And so this is what this work means. So if you come from a particular family background and dynamic, you have a very particular class dynamic, do you know how to talk to your people from that place and space? That's the thing you're going to need to perfect in the next 4 years in order to, that is your lane, that is your work, in order to ensure 2022, again, talking to the voting people, 2022, that we are expanding our reach in both the House and the Senate. And in 2024, there is hopefully a actual left or actual progressive presidential candidate. That's all I got.